My name is Stephen Arthur Diamond, born December 7th, 1946, in Panama, Republic of Panama, in Central America, where boats from all over the world come through the canal. I first met Marshall Bloom when we started the New York office, the New York LNS office. Our group stealthily moved the whole New York Office of Liberation News Service into a huge Avis renter truck and drove it up to Massachusetts to a farm which we had secretly purchased, Marshall and myself and others. But you see, we were still doing the news service up until like December of the first winter, and then we stopped. And then everything started to get better because we could focus the attention on the farm. Well, Marshall Bloom committed suicide on November 1st, 1969. Marshall just decided that it was time for him to go. So he hooked up the exhaust pipe to his Triumph and sat there reading the Boston Record American while the car filled up with carbon monoxide. And he rolled on out of existence in the body. First time I laid eyes on Elwood Babbitt, I was lost up there in Warwick looking for this lumber mill, Steve Clark's lumber mill. Got to Elwood's house, and Elwood came out, and I asked him the directions. He just looked like any regular farmer, but except there was some weird look in his eye or something.
This is man, the spot. It is small. It is molecular structure. It's atoms, whatever you want to term it. It's a whole collage of energy hooked to 7 rings of life. These rings are laws, immutable from the very beginning when gross earth was pressured or thought into being through the desire of all creative force of which you once used to be. Between the rings is the vacuums, and these vacuums you get into because you are afraid to move out to the next ring. You say, well, I'd like to get into the first plane or the first astral condition, astral body. You don't have to get in any special position. You don't have to eat special foods. You don't have to go through a lot of exercises, rigmaroles, breathing. The simple process of meditation, and it's the key, and they say it's the trick that many can't do. Shut off your head and let the spirit flow. That is the only trick to meditation. And that is quite a trick. You assume a good attitude, a positive attitude. Read a book. Listen to some music. Hug your wife. Take her to bed. Anything to get you in your good attitude. Then shut off the brain. And don't think for 1 minute that because you get out in the astral, you know everything, you know all the streets paved with gold, and you're going to float around on a cloud and really enjoy life. You're taking with you the exact thought forms you build up here on Earth. You're going to take the same problems. You're going to meet the same people. There's nothing to making a transition to leave this costume behind. It's just like walking from this stage out there in the anteroom. There's only one difference you're going to feel. You're going to feel light. You're going to feel free. If you've lost an arm or a leg, or you're handicapped, that completely dissolves because you become whole spirit in the spirit body. The spirit body is nothing but fog. and it swirls. The swirling is the energy force that is behind it, the thought form. So your vehicle of thought, in case you decide you're going to pass out tomorrow or jump off a cliff, is thought. You think anywhere you want to be and you're instantly there. And you take your right there and you look over on your left and you'll see the Route 2 bypass bridge. Come right up that road to the Snake Bridge and then keep coming straight. Don't take your right and you'll hit me right on top of the mountain. It's the second house on the right, and there's a couple of cars and a wood pile out front of the house and 1,000,000 dogs. Okay?
By the way, that was a really heavy letter from those people in New Hampshire. I saw on your desk. The kid is in the...
Oh, yeah, that schizophrenic thing.
The picture even looks very schizophrenic.
I'm going to get after that.
What is this?
It's on my desk in there. It's a kid that had a very brilliant IQ and was going on to college and fame, and he was on scholarships, and suddenly he went berserk, and they put him on tranquilizers, vitamins, and drugs, and they have declared him schizophrenic. And he comes home once in a while under heavy sedation. Mother and father wrote me in desperation that maybe I could change the vibes or whatever to get him out of the schizophrenic so he could continue in a very normal way.
Yeah, the letter from the kid looks real gone.
Childish.
Yeah, really gone.
I mean, if he could be near here where he could be in touch with you or Fisher and so on for a couple of weeks, rather
No,
than
it'd take just one sitting with Fisher and Casey to straighten that out.
it would.
It's a very heavy thing there that I'd have to sit and get into with him.
I see.
And get in his energy and really swap it out. Thought for us more than verbal. A couple hours with him and he'll jump right back into all his studies again.
Is that right?
But it's a highly personal thing that I've looked into quite deeply, and I wouldn't want it aired, you know. It's
No.
Hello. Hi. Yeah.
glad to know you. Glad to know you.
Are you Elwood?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Nice to meet you.
Sit down, make yourself to
Okay,
home.
it's
Hi.
Western Net.
Glad to know you. Excuse me if I don't get up. Want a cup of coffee?
No, thank you. We just did.
Oh, you did? Well, you should have waited and ate with us. He's a great professor.
How do you do?
My wife, Emily. My daughter, Alma. My son, Kevin, over in the chair.
Nice to meet everybody. This is my wife, Jeanette.
If you want to meet all the farm animals, you got to go outdoors.
How many dogs do you have?
Well, we had 12 or 13. But we're down to Topper, Flush, about 3 more other puppies, about 6, I guess. Horses, cows, chickens, cats, everything. Yeah.
The other gentlemen are here.
Hi, come on in.
Okay. Richard Turner, everyone, and Elwood.
Glad to know you.
Eric Popke, WGBH.
Glad to know you. Who wants tea? Raise your hand.
I think I'll have a
3.
What is this program that you have?
It's the title is Cosmic Citizens, and it's a series, 1 hour, and it's primarily in metaphysics.
Oh, yeah.
It's a channel.
So, Elwood, in reading the article in the Globe, it appears that you're rather ill-disposed toward the 15-year-old guru and some others.
I was brought up from the first moment I could really hear with a physical ear that there's nothing higher than the truth. And if you live by it, regardless of anything else, you can't go wrong. And you don't flower it over with half-truths like people live in today. And so if I say something, I'm not meaning to be harsh or negative, but I'm putting it in truth's slot where it belongs. And this provokes me to no end when I hear all these sky pilots getting up and murmuring a lot of things that cause guilt complexes. And God knows the people that rap on my door and the letters that come, it's pathetic to see how people are hyped.
The real objection to the Maharishi is the personality cult, the creation of a of a person that's an exceptional person that must be worshipped, instead of concentrating on the actual spiritual truth, the unfoldment of the spirituality of everybody, so that one person is given the what should be is a part really of the heritage of everyone. Now the trouble with the churches, and the reason why Elwood has made the remark that the churches should all be abolished, is that they have bound around the whole thing with their ritual and with a complicated theology, and then when they disagreed about theology, decide to massacre each other, the way they're doing now in Ireland. Well, this is what has brought about the degeneration, you see, of the real spiritual mission that the church is supposed to have had. And what is wrong with the Christian churches is not that they're churches, but that they're not Christian.
Man in himself, in his negativity, draws all of this cataclysmic conditioning we're going through now. All of these world affairs, in other words. Because he is snared at the nature where all his lessons are right before his eyes. So it's not a place where you say there's a personified God giving up. Man in his own negative thinking is bringing in a collapse of many things which are happening now. From that collapse, man is going to rise from the ashes and realize more his potential, that he's not here for material gain. He's here to learn lessons and to bring the omnipotence of his spiritual being into direct contact with positive force.
Charles Hapgood is Elwood's straight man. He's the guy who authenticates Elwood, because he's a scientist, and he set out to authenticate and to research what it meant for this trance medium to be bringing these spirits through.
He didn't seem to have any of the signs of the usual medium. I was mean to say he didn't have any paraphernalia, and there was no hocus pocus, and there were no occult signs on the wall, and there was no occult literature around. When I started talking to him, he talked like a farmer about personal things, and then he took me into his office for a reading, and I sat down in this chair, and he handed me a piece of paper and said, would you be so kind as to write the name of someone in spirit you wanted to talk to, and 3 questions, and write 3 questions. So I asked him, what do you mean by in the spirit? I mean, you mean dead? And he said yes. Well, of course, I didn't. That was the first time I knew, the first thing, that moment that I knew I was talking to a spiritualist. I thought a psychic, I was going to meet a psychic, you know, who would, but a spiritualist contacting the dead, you know, to me this was something I hadn't counted upon. And what's more, I had only just recently written, just before that, a statement saying that the idea of contacting the dead was ridiculous. You see?
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, I have no doubt in immortality, the reproduction of spiritual and cellular disturbances that can be changed through molecular activity. I do not doubt the spiritualistic approach to life, as long as it is one done in a positive way. That is, to communicate with deceased relatives is a positive fact, but can only be done in a very positive attitude. I have found, however, it is much better, more discernment of growth, to enter into outer circles of enlightenment, and thus have a full philosophy of your own identification, of your own abilities, and of your own oneness with all of the creative force. I had proof beyond dispute that there was a continuity of life. And although I doubted, I was the greatest skeptic, I did find that the expansion of awareness brought me my own experiences. But no one can actually believe until they've had total revelation to themselves. And this is possible with all things, just not human beings.
I just think projecting outward into the very beautiful, the very core of all life. Then suddenly it's like someone turned on a huge cosmic vacuum cleaner. It's the only way I can describe it. And I feel the energy being sucked out of me. It's just like the last throes of death. It moves out, and as that moves out, the energy has to be just balanced rightly so that Fisher can take over my body, using it as a medium of exchange like a telephone to talk to you.
So one Sunday we all went up there, and it was really like he knew we were coming, you know. You get that feeling with a lot of people, and particularly a guy who is a medium or a psychic or a clairvoyant. He let drop a few things in the conversation that he knew about us personally, that he somehow knew something about us, and that he had foreseen that we were coming in some loose way, you know, like he dropped a word which rang a bell in my mind, or rang a bell in Dan's mind, or Chuck's mind. And that's a lot of times how these people do it. They don't say directly, I know you're from so-and-so, you were born in so-and-so, and I can tell you this. They sort of drop it in sideways, and it's up to you to make the connection. I mean, I really wanted it to be true, whatever that means, or I really wanted it to be real, whatever that means. And so I decided I would be more skeptical. And I had this percentages in my head that it was sort of 85% on and 15% off, that Elwood was a channel and information was coming through, but it just wasn't precise. It wasn't exactly clear. It was cloudy. In fact, maybe it was even made up at times. So I decided that the best way was to suspend the question of reality and just dig what was happening, you know, and just try to, you know, get the information that was coming through, try to understand it and put it together.
If you could look and see yourselves as colors, as energies flowing instead of living, that every atom in your body, every organ has its own frequency of, or radiation of vibration attached to creative force. If you could see it, you'd probably pass out on the spot. Really, because if you realized that every one of those atoms had to function at a specific second with all the other atoms to allow you your animation, and then you saw where one thought either helped those atoms in their radiance or short-circuited them through your depressions or your wants or your greeds, or you're constantly criticizing or judging or scorning your fellow man. This defeats the atom's purpose. We're working with the Mane Padme Om. I'm saying the jewel is in the lotus. The jewel has 7 petals representing the 7 laws of Vishnu or of creative force. You are the jewel, and it's located right in the center of your forehead. It's an unblinking eye, and it constantly sweeps the whole environment with that ray of creative force. And if you dare to turn it on higher than the voltage you know, you can bend nails if you want to, move mountains, do anything you want, because this is tapping a creativity which is good.
Church on Sunday morning was as much a part of our life as eating breakfast, you see. There wasn't sometimes more than 6 or 8 people in the congregation, and there were times when, if we had a service during the week for one of the special holy days, there would just be the minister's wife, my mother, and myself at that service. A friend who was also a member of that same church decided that it would be a nice idea to to introduce me to Elwood. So, through a friend of a friend, she arranged a blind date. And in fact, it was my first date. As far as his mediumship was concerned, the minute that it became apparent to the minister and his wife, they were pretty much against thinking that that he was working with the devil. And the more that they talked against Elwood, of course, the more that I talked for. Because after all, I was in love with the man.
Now, as we progress through these vibrations, we find you in England. Here you lived as a doctor of medicine, a scientist, and again had a deep interest in the outer dimensional experiences.
A few years ago, I left my body, and I realized that there was no way to really explain to someone what it's like to leave your body. They have to experience it, you know. And I became slightly irrational. You know, this was only a few years ago, and had things been different, I might have really gone berserk. And so when he was telling me about this Dr. Fisher, who was the last full incarnation that I had as a person, because the next three were all, I died real young as a kid. And when he was telling me about this British doctor who flipped out because he was seeing too much, I understood it perfectly, you know, it really rang a bell.
I do wish to make my point to you very clear, that you know what I mean when I say in this lifetime there is the incomplete vibration that is felt from many other lifetimes. And this animation or expression of material self now is to finally close the circle where you can feel peace, tranquility, and understanding.
You know, I like that Jenny Vendetta Van Dien, you know. When she comes in, she gives me a lift. She's always so full of love and affection, you know. Jenny, I'm passionately interested to know about the book. What's going to be done?
You come into my boudoir, and I'll tell you about the book. I'll tell you about your life. I'll tell you about your beauty. And I shall tell about your time when you lost your pants.
Well, why?
And I see by your hand you will be married soon.
Oh.
Yes, no.
No, I hope.
But you endeavor to marry the spiritual force,
Yes.
the creative force. And this you will do, and rejuvenate your body to a fuller youthful appearance. No.
She's always telling how she's going to come out to my house and snuggle down in the sheets and all that. And
She asked for his palm. And Elwood did this, you see.
Let's not get into description, huh?
I want to know, you know, back in the 18th century, Dr. Johnson, he wrote a lot of stuff, but he said God did not intend man to know whether a book would sell. See? Meaning that the trouble with getting a book publisher, or even when you get a book published, whether it's going to sell or not, that nobody can tell ahead of time. And this goes for Dr. Fisher.
Well,
He doesn't know either.
we'll find out about it.
I'm afraid so. I just hope that we'll have some action there sometime. I must say I'm fed up with the delays. The Spirit, when they say there's still time, you never know whether they mean decades, centuries. You know. Because what's a century? We identified that the incarnation. You were the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop of Canterbury in the 17th century. Your bad temper was famous.
Oh?
Yes, because on this Archbishop there are whole books written about him. Now they say that you were, of course, that you were very kind. You could be kind and very generous, but you could also be very rough on people. Everybody was kind of a little afraid. Not afraid, but, you know. Yes, I do.
Can't accept it, fine, be honest. If you want to come up and say afterward, look, I think you're full of bullshit, that's your privilege. I'm glad to hear it. Because I'm looking for total honesty and total truth. And what you think is bull today will probably be the truth tomorrow. So give me 5 minutes or 3 or 4 to get out of my body and let somebody else take it. And just a few more minutes to get back in again. Well, here we are, back in the manure pile of the living. And I've been squatting here in this heap of flesh, watching you people squirm, just waiting for me to say something, anything. And I enjoyed making you wait. Simply because life's a big wait as far as you're concerned anyway. You wait for this, you wait for that, you wait for the next breath. So I want to introduce myself as the spirit of Sam Clemens or Mark II or Mark III, whichever you wish to call me, and are in doubt about my continuity. How you, Mr. Hapgood, have a great problem. And I've heard your barrages entering into spirit and your constant allusions to my incapabilities of outfitting you into the tuxedo, top hat, and gold-tipped cane, which soon you will be wearing, so I advise you to dust them off. But your only failure is not seeing the spiritual conditions represented on or in the book, which have been led into devious pathways for the simple experience of helping those in need at the present moment.
I realize that all the disappointments have perhaps served a good purpose, because each time that the book gets thrown back from publishers, I get to work and improve the book. But I'm afraid this might go on forever.
Your frustrations and your wanting to be very obnoxious were inexcusable, and I commit you to the depths of Hades and all its threats and innuendos. To everything there is a reason, and our reasons are ultimately going to win you a place, as I've told you before, at the White House, where you will hang in a very strong rope affair, where all can watch your tongue hang out, and your eyes pop out, your pants drop below your knees, and you succumb to this world into the next.
Wow. All right. I accept.
However, we'll be happy to receive you.
I began to see spirit colors in fog-like form. When Elwood and I were first living on the mountain here, it is as happy and comfortable to me to see a room filled with color, fog-like color, as it is to sip a cup of coffee, because I have lived it so easily and enjoyed it so much that I'm not amazed at this phenomenon at all. I remember that one of the first seances that I went to, I received an affirmation from Dr. Fisher. And I was to use that many times when the going was rough and when I was making decisions in my life which were very important. And it was simply this, that divine love always has and always will supply my every need. And that says it right there. That was all that I needed. My most cherished dream is that we will be able to bring our happiness into the lives of everyone in the world. And I really mean that. I really mean that in the fullest sense. And it could happen because although we will not, of course, be able to personally touch in on everyone's life, when someone is happy for what they have learned through the philosophy, they in turn can touch in on someone's life, and so it grows like the links of a chain. And I can visualize very beautifully how it can all come to be, and I live for that day.
A particular project we're working on is out-of-body experiences or astral projection. The neutral term is out-of-body experiences. We're trying to find out whether there is something actually that leaves. We know that people experience themselves as perhaps traveling from one place to another or actually being in a different place. This occurs to many people. Well, it's been reported by many people who have actually died, and then by some superhuman means they've been restored to life by doctors. It also happens to people, say, in auto accidents. They somehow get knocked out of their body by the shock. They seem to be floating above and seeing everything happening. It happens to some people naturally when they go to bed at night, as he has this very naturally. Part of the reason that we at our organization do this type of experiment is that our society is so technologically and scientifically oriented that for this society, this is a path towards spirit and spiritual growth. The perceptual apparatus that we have here has a target that can be seen only from a small area in front of this window here. Okay, the first target is ready.
It's red, the lower left quadrant. It's the slave.
Because we've been working with people to whom this is a very new experience, and they probably can do it, and they're learning.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of in the kindergarten stage. But we don't get too good results because they haven't quite mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the people who have really mastered it are so far beyond it that they're not interested in doing it.
Mm-hmm. I was out of the body, and I kept thinking this time, instead of standing in front of it, I'm going to get inside it. See? So I could watch the things twirl. But when you twirled it, that whole thing went into a hell of a velocity. And it was like a roulette wheel. It kept slowing down, and boom. So I couldn't see the damn holes if I went to hell.
I wouldn't bind you all together with a stitch, could not tear. If I had all the power that my soul must know within, I would never pass you by without saying, come on, begin.
What do you got to eat?
Well, if you haven't had any supper, that's too bad, because I don't have anything to eat.
Did you have difficulties in the community when you were a kid because you were a medium or because you were...
Well, I was thought of as what you might call odd in some respects. I mean, I was never in the classroom. I was always in the office as the principal's helper because I had no interest, and I was always gazing out the window or giving some flip answer because I was totally bored with the whole process. My mother will bear witness to that. I never stuck to anything in my life.
I was thinking about that accident, your car accident, which was a very big thing in your life. Do you think there was any karmic significance, or now in retrospect, this accident which caused lacerations of the throat and everything? Do you remember being in the hospital?
Yeah,
and the stuff
I
that
walked
happened?
into the hospital.
What, they thought you weren't going to live?
No, they didn't think I would live, and in fact, the three nurses that were attending me had said that they felt very cold in my presence and felt that I'd be gone in the morning and would try to make me comfortable.
And then what happened?
Well, that's when my grandmother appeared to me, and I heard this beautiful music beyond what we know as music. And then this huge white ball of light that went through me and said peace. And after that, I responded to where I could see and hear and swallow again.
Was that the first time you'd experienced that, like that?
No. I wasn't
You saw the
frightened at
chord,
all.
the etheric chord.
It was the first time I was maybe experienced that I felt that the severance was going to be made of the silver cord.
In other words, that was the first time you were that close to
And I
understanding
accepted
that.
it. I said, well, it's another go-around.
When you go into trance and you get sucked out the cord just gets extended. It's not. It's always there. It's always present.
No, it's in this case, it's completely severed. The whole body steps out. There's no cord. That's the difference.
When you're in
dying.
trance?
Yeah, that's the difference. Though it's like I step aside spiritually. But the minute I do, Fisher takes over to sustain life and to use it to communicate with.
I'm interested in your war experience.
All right, let's join the war.
You were sort of hot to get in the Marines, according to...
I got in the Marines because Fisher told me to.
Fisher told you to go in the Marines?
Yeah, because
Really?
I could never see the full material impact of a material existence. I couldn't appreciate it. And I wanted that other side of life so that if I counseled somebody, I could see where they were at in the material as well as in the spiritual. The only thing that would teach me that would be the horrors of war. And so out of that whole division, there's very few of us left.
Right. You were there at Pearl Harbor
Yeah.
when it was falling. You
Yeah.
saw the Arizona go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about that story of the spirit carrying the rifle?
Well, this is where men are suddenly killed in battle, where the emotional violence of that moment, cellular violence, you know, an emotional impact to the man. The minute the spirit leaves the body, it's such a total reaction that in the emotional patterns that
Doesn't make the transition.
they're outside the body, but they pick up the rifle. It's the material object and keep right on going because they're only one thought in their head: to kill or be killed. But the minute someone mentions they're out, then they just they vaporize. Saw it at Pearl Harbor when there was 2,500 men aboard the Arizona. They got that 500-pounder, and where the ship had been buckled, and out of it came this huge white mist. And these were the individuals that had been lifted up from the watery grave. They stayed suspended till suddenly there was a force turned on in the cosmos where it seemed like that whole vapor was sucked up into the infinitude.
Were all those spirits melded together as they were leaving?
No, they were all separate. You could see them as each in his own identity, but come together in a flock, not knowing which way to turn.
So then, through the war experience, you sort of became really aware of the material plane of the
That's
body.
what it taught me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The miseries you suffer if you're a materially structured or disciplined person to the five senses rather than to the 7 Vishnu laws.
You've had like a lot of influence on this whole area in western New England, spiritually speaking. I mean,
This is one of the toughest places in the world to crack.
Really?
Because you notice no other medium has come in and tried to open up anything because of the Yankee tradition of suspicion and not being contented with being forced into other avenues of thought. But I'm not, from a spiritual standpoint, I'm not here living a life. I'm here to serve. And this is why I'm stepping out now into mass media work, because the world is ripe for it.
Did you consult with Fisher about that, about any of these things, about these public appearances at all?
Well, he's guiding me on it, because I'm very careful of if it gets to exploitation, identity, loss of identity, I'm just going to pull my head in.
You think you can do that? You think you can keep it?
I think I can keep it balanced, otherwise I'd never started it. I just want to keep it away from my private life, and I want my family kept away from it. And I don't want them to invade my mother and her telephone.
Right.
You get some pictures of her?
No, she wouldn't let us.
Oh, come on, Mother. Be a sport. This is on your son's life.
Elwood, I'd put you to shame.
You should come sit over here, Mr. Babbitt, just for a few minutes.
Come on over here.
Elwood was a Mr. Jekyll and a Mr. Hyde.
Really?
That's me. Yeah, that's true.
How so? How so?
Well,
Mrs.
2 personalities. He had split personality.
Yeah. Which did you like better?
Well,
Mr.
you
Jekyll
go
or
along.
Mr.
You
Hyde?
go along with both of them.
Right.
You have to accept people and their moods regardless of what it is. I've learned to get along with people, my children and people on the outside too. I never have any trouble with anybody.
Do you believe that in the soul or the spirit surviving after death? You think there's some part of us that lives on?
I don't know how to answer that because I don't know. I know this is supreme being, and where I'm going after I leave here, I don't really worry about it. I didn't worry before I came here, so I'm not surely worried now where I'm going.
Great.
I know that I can't live forever, and when my time comes, I'll go.
Well, the other thing that happened at my life reading was that Disney came in to talk to us about making the film. Evidently, Disney had been hovering on the scene and wanted to advise us.
Better still, realize that whatever your man at the camera is doing, everyone is seeing, and he is their eyes and ears, and you must give a full portrayal in each scene or you'll be defeated. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Do you think this film should be in color or in black and white?
No, you want to make your film in color because color wasn't brought forward into the industry for pleasure. We found that color remained on the retina of the eye a lot longer and thus made such an impression on the viewer that he returned for more of the same.
Well, anyway, I went to see the Disneys. I was down in L.A., and I decided it would be great if somebody who actually knew Walt Disney could listen to this tape and say if it sounded like Uncle Walt coming through. Now, as the tape started to play, I noticed that they started slipping into it, and then suddenly something would happen, and a guard shield would spring up, and they would sort of sit up, shake their heads, and say, no, this can't be true, and look at each other. And then they'd listen a little more, and they'd sort of fall into it, and then they'd start laughing at some joke or other in the thing. So by the end of the whole tape, of listening to the tape of Disney Spirit, neither the Roy Disney Jr. or his wife could say whether it was really him or not. They said, you know, I'm really sorry, we wish we could say it's not, but we can't. And we also wish we could say that it is, but we can't. And that was a very interesting sort of thing that happened. You know, it didn't resolve anything for me as far as the reality of Elwood as a medium, the reality of these spirits, Dr. Fisher, Walt Disney, etc., Mark Twain. And all the time I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, somebody that I knew has got to come through this medium, and then I'll be able to decide once and for all whether it's for real. And the somebody, of course, was Marshall Bloom, who had been the founding energy of the Sparmen, who committed suicide in 1969.
Marshall Bloom was a dear friend of mine and a lot of people in the area. He grew up in Denver, Colorado, went to Amherst College, graduated in 1966, and he was somewhat of a radical. He was the editor of the Amherst College Student, and in this very chapel gave numerous sermons on the march in Selma, Alabama. At the Pentagon March in October of '67, Marshall founded the Liberation News Service, which was the news service, the AP more or less, of the underground press, which was at its peak at the time. In the early fall of 1968, Marshall left New York City and the LNS in the middle of a faction fight and moved to a farm in Montague, 10 miles north of here, which was one of the first organic farming communes of the late 60s of that period, that movement. And the following year, on November 1st, 1969, Marshall left his body of his own will, suicide is the earthly term, by hooking up a vacuum pipe to the exhaust of his little green TR3 that he'd bought in London. He was just sitting there reading the Times.
I decided that, in the back part of my head, I decided, well, if Marshall comes through, Elwood can't fake it. You know, it's either going to be Marshall or it's not going to be Marshall, and everybody who knew Marshall will know. And we kept asking him, you know, hey, Elwood, can you tell Dr. Fisher, because that's how it works, that we want to get in touch with Marshall and have him come through. Then a lot of weird little things happened, like suddenly David Eisenhower wrote something about Marshall out of nowhere. On April 30th, in the New York Times on the op-ed page was this David Eisenhower piece decrying the death of student activism and talking about Marshall Bloom particularly, who had committed suicide, as saying that's what happened to the movement. And I began to get this feeling that maybe it was Marshall pushing that pen in David Eisenhower's hand in some way. I realized that it didn't matter whether it was real or not to me. I had shelved the whole proposition. But it was coming back again, and now the film was going to be over, the shooting was going to be over, and we were going to see the last clincher. Our friend Bloom was going to come through. But what exactly happened that night is sort of another story.
Hello there. Hello there. Does anyone hear me? I'm Marshall Bloom, and I'm so excited I don't know whether I'm in this body. It's such a strange experience that I'm in the environment I once knew. I can't hardly believe it, but I can say to you, you're here. I see Harvey. Hi. It's delightful, and I'm glad to be here. I hope you can hear me all right. I enjoy knowing now what you fellows tried to tell me, but I was trying for a new vista, a new world, and by gosh, you're doing it, but I just got myself in the way.
Well, what was your transition like?
It was a floating sensation, a freedom from a very strong heaviness I kept feeling. That is, I had no incentive after the papers closed, after I felt that I had been rebuffed by so many, after I found I couldn't put the world back together. No one individual can, I guess, but I do find that those that say I committed suicide, I did not. There was another pair of hands involved in my transition that you know nothing about. I'll not go into it. I do not regret it. I hold no sorrow. I hold no anger against a party involved. You know the hard conditions we went through in a monetary way, and in fighting to hold a paper together that was still going good, but not accepted by the straights or by the establishment. I made enemies, and I'll say they found me. But you know nothing of this because of the details were so perfect that you considered it suicide. But I certainly was not. And you know my own thoughts well enough to know that I would not have taken my life at a time when we were working toward a better and bigger goal. I like what you're doing, but you've been hampered in many ways. But there are vast improvements within the next year. Now, I'm saying year in time because I see the change of seasons as I talk to you. And there will be much more to do, and other people around also. So continue in your way and express yourself in the fullest. And you watch for me because I will be your proof, not just in another body. I'm being called away, so I'll leave you. But no, I'll be at the farm whenever your thought impression knows that it is mine. Goodbye now.
At the very beginning, for the first 5 minutes of the trance, I felt the definite feeling of Marshall in the room. And he was doing some gestures with his hands that reminded me of Marshall. I did decide to give it a chance in my mind and think, well, could he have been murdered? Was the thing so perfectly done by some, quote, enemies? But I knew that wasn't right. I knew he wasn't murdered. Because there was enough of a vibe about Marshall, I still felt that something was coming through. And even though the information was off, and my skepticism had returned, it didn't settle the question. You know, like Roy Disney and his wife, who couldn't tell me if it was really Uncle Walt or not. I couldn't tell you if it was really Marshall or not. In other words, I couldn't say out and out it wasn't Marshall.
Well, of course, I was constantly raising my sights. If I could talk to Nostradamus, a master, if I could talk to Michael, why then might I not talk to Christ? And immediately I talked with Gabriel. And Gabriel, of course, is the announcer of Christ. It took about 3 weeks to bring the Christ force in. And I can remember that as the time approached, I began to feel, I live about 20 miles from Elwood, but I began to feel in the morning, I would feel the glow, I would feel a radiation. I felt the penetration of some tremendous energy that permeated my dwelling, and it got stronger as the time grew nearer. Now, tonight, he comes again.
Though I speak with reason to your being, yet in your reason to my unreasoning, you seek not the fullness of your being. I speak of love, yet love is foreign to your love, for it seeks no fullness of purpose. It seeks that which is only earthly, seeks not the meaning, the commitment, the fullness, the creativity of your perfect reasoning to your imperfect love. For if I had sought the wisdom of the harsh conditions of life, if I had seen and known the expression of materialism or of the way of the earth, I would not have given of myself. I cannot leave myself to you. I cannot give that which I cannot give, for you in your acceptance would not accept, but rather deny. For if you were to see me, you would expand yourself in your denial of my fullness. I seek a nearness to earth when your upheavals begin, when your way is changed to spirit way. So seek within, so that you may see the light and be a part thereof of a new and full kingdom. Well, thank you, folks, for coming, and I hope you take something home with you. Okay, let's go.
If I'd known how much I loved you, I'd have never have gone away. I'd have shown you all the kindness that I feel